So I know I'm standing in between basketball games and the bar, so I'm going to try to keep this lively and short. But hopefully I'll give everybody here a bit of insight into some things that you probably don't know much about, or maybe do know a little bit about, as well as what you can do in your own seats. It is a rare occasion for me to be standing in a room that is majority women, so I'm going to take advantage of this, and hopefully I can encourage or get some of you excited to do a bit more in some areas that we really can make a difference in that are struggling, particularly with female entrepreneurship. So again, my name is Mariquit Corcoran. I am the Chief Innovation Officer at Barclays, and what that means is it is my job to do a few things. One big thing is to find interesting technologies and companies for Barclays to do business with or potentially invest in, as well as develop programs that can actually help support entrepreneurs at all stages of their startup journey. Predominantly focus on fintechs. The definition of fintech has really expanded over the years. I think 5, 6, 7 years ago, fintech meant payments company, but I think these days fintech can really mean any company that can be used by a financial services firm, so that definition has significantly expanded. And in this work, I've seen just tremendous struggles when it comes to female entrepreneurs and female founders, and that's where I want to give everybody here a little bit of insight tonight. 3 key takeaways for tonight. One is that female entrepreneurs are going to play a key role in the economic recovery, especially the prosperity post this global economy challenges that we've had as a result of COVID-19. Second, women have shown that they are an underinvested asset, but they are profitable leaders, and their innovations will mark a new phase of technological development in the 21st century. And last but not least, by doubling down on female founders, the world's largest organizations could succeed in abolishing the gender gap in entrepreneurship while accelerating economic recovery. Most of us here work for large companies. We also have some founders and leaders of startups at different stages. And again, we can't change things overnight, but collectively, the people in this room can do things to advance this agenda. And it needs all the help it can get. So I'm going to share some stats, which you're probably going to be a bit surprised about in just a couple of minutes. But really, I'm looking for everybody here to please assert your voice and demonstrate that diversity of thought, backgrounds, and ideas, they lead to stronger teams and greater results. Your success here by impacting this space can be leveraged to create a more inclusive future for women across the business landscape. And that's payments, finance, and across the board. And I really am excited to see what everybody here can do as a takeaway, hopefully after listening to some of these things and taking some action. Before I go into that, quick background about me. So as Jen kindly mentioned, I spent 18 years at Goldman Sachs. My last step there was helping develop a digital fintech called Marcus. And I've been leading innovation at Barclays now for 4 years. Throughout my career, I've served on the senior steering committee for various women-focused groups, whether it's Women in Technology, the Win Gender Network, various women's networks. I've been involved with programs like Encore at Barclays, which helps support women returning to work after taking a leave. I lead something called Female Executives in FinTech, which is a network in New York that helps bring together women founders with women investors, as well as women leaders from established companies. And in addition to my company type of activities in the women's sphere, I also launched something called the Female Innovators Lab, which is a partnership between Barclays and a venture capital firm called Anthemis, and which has now become one of the flagship programs at Barclays that is supporting and helping women entrepreneurs, both with capital as well as people and resources and other support to help them launch their businesses and make them successful. I do all this because I think investing in women is both a social and business imperative. And I do it because personally, throughout my career, I've always wished that someone had helped me just a little bit more. And for those that have lent a helping hand or maybe said a kind word every now and then, those are the things that I do remember in my career, and those things do make an impact and do make a difference. So for those of you who are saying those kind words, lending a hand, please continue doing so. And for those of you who have received it, you know how impactful that is, that little, hey, will you come sit with me? Hey, can I give you some advice? Just all of those little things collectively really do make an impact in your success and in your career and your progression. And I do believe that the best way of thinking differently is by encouraging diversity, right? I'm not just talking about gender, but diversity of thought is incredibly important. You're gonna make the same decisions over and over again if you have the same people making them all the time. So I do promote diversity in every aspect when it comes to decision-making, building a team, leading a team, et cetera. No secret that the world of payments is a male-dominated space, and that's why now more than ever, I think we need to continue to raise our collective voice to address the stark disparity when it comes in supporting women in a sector that the sector has really been lacking in quite a long time. One area that we focus on at Barclays and in the work I do is supporting female-led startups. Now here are the stats I was talking about. Despite evidence showing that female-owned startups are a promising investment, only, get this, 2.3% of US venture capital funding went to female-led startups in 2020. US startups raised a record $143 billion that year, but funding to venture-backed companies focused solely on women has been severely lacking. And you would like to think perhaps 2021, which had record numbers of capital going into startups, you would have thought that maybe it improved a little bit. That number actually went from 2.3% to 2%. That is astounding, and every time I read that or hear that, I think it's a typo, but unfortunately, that's the reality that we're in. And even though, again, capital is out there, there's so much money going into startups and investing, the tide is really not turning quickly enough when it comes to investing in female-led companies. These are some of the lowest percentages we've seen invested in women since 2016. So we're not really progressing in the right direction. I do believe that female entrepreneurship will play a key role in economic recovery and prosperity, especially as the global economy attempts to recover from the debilitating effects of COVID-19, but data indicates the pandemic has not treated everybody equally. According to a study by McKinsey, the pandemic has had a disproportionate effect on women's careers, and women have been nearly 2 times more likely to be laid off than men during this period. It's also important to note that women, during the pandemic, there was a significant rise in the need for at-home childcare services, and women who are, again, a bit of an assumption, but traditionally expected to be homemakers were twice as likely to leave their jobs versus their husbands in order to stay home and care for their families. I'm sure many of us have experienced this, seen this, observed this, and it has really set the gender disparity gap a bit further back than, of course, any of us would like. There was a report from the Female Founders Forum called Resilience and Recovery, where they combined discussions with female founders and data analysis to identify reasons why female entrepreneurs were disproportionately impacted by the onset of COVID-19. And it showed that COVID-19 exacerbated existing barriers already, and the biggest challenges pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, if we can really say we're post-COVID, has been the same. Access to networks, business advice, and capital. Individually, those things aren't that hard to offer up. I mean, look around this room, there's almost 300 people here, right? We all have knowledge, contacts, access to capital, or work for companies with access to capital. It does take people like yourselves or myself to actually go out there and do something about it. I think back to when we launched a Female Innovators Lab at Barclays. It was something that had never been done before, and people said, you're not gonna be able to do something like that. That's gonna take years and years. We did it in 8 months because we had the right people supporting it, and once you laid out the facts and the impact it could make, not one person could say it was a bad idea, right? And we've actually just announced its expansion into the Europe and UK. So we launched it in New York City, which is home for me because I wanted it to be in the US first, and it's been incredibly successful. We've invested in a number of female-led companies, and we've now expanded that to Europe and the UK. So we are investing in women globally to support their development and really be with them at the earliest stage of their journey. We can't ignore the fact that women in fintech, for example, have really faced through some really big challenges through the course of the pandemic. And again, even though there's been an exponential growth of funding going into startups, there is still a challenge for women entrepreneurs. And hopefully we can create more opportunities for women as we progress post this pandemic. And we look forward into working with companies, investing in companies, helping companies succeed. And what I'd say here is, it's not that you're gonna work or invest in a company just because it's led by women, right? That's not really the call to action here. But it's seeking out those more diverse companies, talking to them, asking them questions that they may not often hear. So I mentor a lot of female founders, and it is interesting that the challenge that most of them have when it comes to speaking to venture capital firms or investors, the number one question they get is, well, what's gonna happen if this goes wrong? What's gonna happen if this goes wrong? Have you thought about the downside of this? Yet, when I do speak to the male founders, most of the questions they get are, what's the best case scenario? What's gonna happen if volume doubles? And it's just a different view, and I'm not sure if these questions are intentional, if they're subconscious, but a lot of that is partly because I think that a lot of these venture capital firms are predominantly male-dominated. And so, unfortunately, not all, there aren't a lot of women working in the VC world, and the women who do work in the VC world rarely actually have the investment-making decision. So there are 351 venture capital firms in the United States, and only 34 of them have 2 or more women in decision-making positions. That's again, right? How are we gonna get more investors to invest in the women when they, oftentimes the people asking these questions perhaps don't relate to the companies that are being launched, or perhaps just have a subconscious thought to ask them the, worst case scenario type of questions. So it is something that is being monitored and looked at. And for any of you looking to go into venture capital, a lot of the investors I know are actively trying to create more diverse investment teams. So there is an opportunity there for women looking to get into that space. The Female Innovators Lab, not that I want anyone here to leave their jobs, but if anyone here is looking for support in launching or building a company, it's an incredible program. It is actually a physical, hands-on program where the founders will move in with the venture capital firm or move in with Barclays and our Rise ecosystem, and we'll actually help them build their teams, build their products, get them investment capital, and actually get them connected to the companies that they want to do business with and the investors that they're looking to get investments from. Let's see. Some interesting stats. I like to share stats because numbers don't lie. In 2019, an analysis by McKinsey found that companies in the top quarter for gender diversity on executive teams were 25% more likely to have above average profitability than companies in the bottom quarter. This is up 21% from 2017 and 15% in 2014. The study also showed that companies with more than 30% women executives were more likely to outperform companies where this percentage ranged from 10 to 30, and these companies were more likely to outperform those with even fewer women executives, or none at all. Similarly, in a survey of more than 350 startups, Mass Challenge and Boston Consulting Group found that women-run businesses deliver higher revenues, equating to more than twice as much per dollar invested than in companies with all-male leadership teams. The data numbers are there, and yet that 2.3%, the drop to 2% stat still really keeps me up at night. And if there's anything we can do to kind of move that up a needle, I mean, look, I'm trying to get to like 10% here, right? I mean, we are so far behind where we need to be. But hopefully, collectively in this room, we all work for companies, and individually we all sit in roles that can actually make a difference here. There's an innovation report published by the Female Founders Forum, and in it, they expertly summed up the need for investment in female founders. I'm going to read this quote. Entrepreneurship in high-growth, high-innovation sectors will determine what the next few decades will look like. New technologies will generate economic growth, solve climate change, and treat previously terminal diseases. This needs the involvement of entrepreneurs and key advancements in these areas, and they're being held back by unnecessary barriers placed before female entrepreneurs. By doubling down on investing in female founders, the world's largest organizations could succeed in really abolishing the gender gap in entrepreneurship while accelerating economic recovery. I hope that resonates with a lot of you. Some of these, again, may have been surprising numbers for you. Some of them may have not. They certainly shock me, and I'm hoping that when I look at the 2022 numbers, it's not going to start with a 2, and hopefully not a 1, but I'm looking for it to go in the opposite direction. But again, it is something that we can all collectively do something about. I've talked about this in various audiences, and everybody has this like look of shock, and everybody wants to talk about it, but it doesn't take a lot to do something about it. And individually, we can't change that number alone, but collectively, we can make a difference in this space. For the fastest possible recovery from this pandemic, we need to access untapped opportunities for growth by removing the barriers which have been holding female founders back. From a purely economic standpoint, there's a clear case to double down on investment in female founders. If women launched and grew businesses at the same rate as men, we would see unparalleled economic growth. The data is clear. Investing in diversity is both a social and business imperative. And I hope that that's what you all take away from this evening. With that, I just want to thank everybody for having me come up here tonight. This is the latest I've had to speak in front of an audience, but it is so good to be back in front of a live audience and not talking to a camera. Thank you.